Hello, I'm retired Battalion Chief Larry Cockman, Chairman of the Greensboro Fire Department History Book Committee. The American Fire Service is rich in tradition and culture. A firefighter's life is filled with many emotional highs and lows. Stories of major fires, national disasters, medical calls, firehouse living, and family life are often verbally shared from one generation to another. Many times these stories are lost forever when a firefighter passes away. In an effort to preserve these stories, in 2019, the Greensboro Fire Department History Book Committee launched a new program of recording audio-video of our retirees' lives. These stories will be shared on our website, gfhbc.org. In 2020, we did not record because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Please listen as these firefighters share their life experiences with all of us.
My name is Robert E. Johnson. E is for Eugene, and my age is too old. No, I'm 61. I was born on December the 25th of 1961. I was a firefighter for 30 years, and when I retired, I was at Station 43. I was on ladder 43, and I was an engineer. They used to call us drivers, but I was an engineer. When I finished, they deemed me engineer extraordinaire or driver extraordinaire. I am born and raised in Greensboro, North Carolina, right here. I am not related to any of the fire department members, even currently. Before I became a firefighter, I did several jobs. I was in construction. I had just recently been married. Got married in 1985 to Gloria Poole at that time, and was kind of searching for my place in life. And I was working right before I got on the fire department with A Breath of Spring, which was a carpet and upholstery cleaning company. And Donald and Patsy Pumphrey, who were friends of mine. And they had friends in church and in our church where we all went together. And there were a lot of firemen there. It was Langford Memorial Baptist Church. And they asked me if that would be a good thing for me to do. Do you think you could be a member of the Greensboro Fire Department? I said, well, I don't know. And I tried 4 years running, and I finally got hired after 4 years of trying. And that was in 1989 when I got hired. Well, some of my hobbies, that's kind of a broad statement or broad question, because I've always tried to be multifaceted. I've always tried to endeavor into different things to try to learn. And my hobbies consist of writing, leather work. I do custom leather work as a hobby. And I also play instruments. I went to school to be a music major at college, at Limestone College in Gaffney, South Carolina. And up to that, Played in high school bands, marching band, pep bands. Did some solo work at church. Almost every Sunday I would sing something or play something. Play guitar, trumpet, harmonica. Really any instrument, I'll try it because I love music, and I love to try to make my own music. It kind of makes a statement of who I am, and it kind of gives me purpose every day of my life. I have 3 goals in my life as a Christian, as a firefighter, and as a husband. I want to learn something. I want to teach something. And then I want to make somebody smile. If I can do that, I'm a success. And getting hired on the fire department was a success for sure. The process when I was hired was you had to do an application, and it was a very extensive application. You filled that out and you turned that application in, and it would run through the city, and then it would go to the fire department. Once it got to the fire department, then they were able to start doing your background search and talk to people that knew you. They were talking to people that I had forgotten I even knew or that knew me. And so, eventually after, like I said, 4 times trying, that 4th time was the charm. And the people that were in charge of the interviews, they, like I said, talked to people all around. And people say, hey, I just talked to somebody about you and maybe trying to get on the fire department. I said, yeah, it'd be a great thing if I could do it. And then after they call you and say you have an imminent job on the fire department, and you accept the challenge, then you move on from there. And they say, okay, we'll report to the training center at such and such a day. Mine was July 1st of 1989, and that's where it all began. Not only talked to my wife about me being hired, but they talked to my mom. They talked to friends that I had. Like I said, people that I don't even remember. She's my biggest supporter, and she's the one that I bring everything home to, whether it's good, bad, or ugly. We talk about things, and we don't leave anything on the table. And I know that when they talked to her, she gave them probably my best attributes, I'm sure. But it's because of the connection that you have when you're married. When you're married, you become one. And so when they talked to her, they were talking to me. And they probably knew that right off the bat. My starting salary on the Greensboro Fire Department was $16,644 a year. When I started on the fire department, I had a part-time job, and it was, some of them paid and some of them didn't. But I worked mowing grass with David Birch. That was probably my most enjoyable. We would go and mow all day and just have a blast, and then get paid to do it. And plus the fellowship that we had, and also as a part-time job later on in my career, I worked at Cardinal Lawn Garden and Hardware, and that was a place where there again, that was some friends from my past that we had rekindled our relationship, and they worked there, and it was just like one big happy family. So that's what I did, because you had to have a little help as far as your income, just to make ends meet sometimes. But it wasn't about the money. To be a firefighter is a calling. It's something that when you get that call, whether it's for you or not. Sure. I remember the names in my training class, at times they fade away, but they're always there in your heart and in your mind. Chris Barracks, Bobby Brown, that group of people. There was a lot of them. I've got them on my phone. I could bring them up and just read right through them if you wanted me to. But Rick Merle is one to remember for sure. Rick Merle was a gentle giant. He was a strong person. He was spiritually strong. He was physically strong. He was mentally strong. And Rick Merle will be missed. Jackie Spoon. That's another one that you just don't know why sometimes, but God's got His reasons. And then there's Jackie Beard, all in my class. And that's sometimes hard to swallow. Funny stories in my training class. There were several. We did a lot of running, and while we were running, there was some cutting up and some antics that would take place. And, people would run so hard that they would get sick sometimes, and we would kind of laugh that off and try to help each other out and pat them on the back and say, let's keep going. We got to keep going. And there was some inspiration there in some of the class. Mentioned Jackie Beard. He was my inspiration. He was the oldest guy in our class. And probably one of the funniest things I can't even talk about. On one of our runs, there was some antics that took place, and to this day, people still talk about it. And if you know about our training class, you know what that antic was in our neighborhood run. So I'm not going to mention that just because I don't want to step on any toes. But
Been there, done that.
Yeah, it's just one of those things you just keep to yourself. My definition of brotherhood and sisterhood is sitting down at the kitchen table at the firehouse. Probably the most important part or time of your shift. Because regardless of what calls you go on or don't go on, when you sit down at the dinner table and whoever's cook day it is, you just sit down and enjoy each other. You talk about family. You talk about things you've done, things you want to do. You talk about training. You talk about things that you try to get each other to help each other with. Things like that. Well, to make a difference on the fire department, it takes team. You can't do it by yourself. But there are many things, many memories in my mind that give an example of what it is to be a firefighter. You never know what you're going to be faced with next. And it's not for everybody. To be a firefighter is something that you first work at, but it's also in your heart right from the beginning. Mine started, if you want me to tell that, mine started when I was just a kid. I was probably 10 or 11 years old, and I heard sirens. I lived on Paddington Street in Greensboro, and I hollered to my mom, and I think my brother was there, and she was holding the dog, and we went out on the back porch because we heard the sirens behind the house. We went out on the back porch and we looked through, and down, I think it was on Saxton, there was a 2-story house on fire. And we were just, all of a sudden, we turned to watch what was going on. Fire trucks showing up, and we could see the flames. We didn't see any people, but the fire trucks showed up, and within seconds, it seemed like the fire was out and the emergency was over. And from that point on, my mother had told me that I told her I'd like to be a firefighter, or back then it was called a fireman. We were firemen, and now we're firefighters, which is great. But my first station and my first apparatus assignments were at Station 12 on Pisgah Church Road, which is now 40. And my first apparatus was Truck 12. That's what we called it back then. It was Truck 12. It was a stick. It was a 100-foot stick, 1964 American LaFrance. And it was yellow. And everything on it was manual. You had to put the outriggers out and turn them down by hand. Everything you did was by hand. My job was to grab the 3-inch hose out of the trough and run it up the ladder and attach the nozzle and the hose, and then drop the remote control, which is what I always tell people. I was in charge of the remote control, which was 2 ropes, and you dropped them off of the end of the nozzle, and that was how you controlled the flow of the water out of the nozzle from the ground. My feeling on the color of a fire truck is a fire truck is supposed to be red. From everything you ever read in any books or on television, you see the red fire trucks. So that's what color they're supposed to be. Now the yellow was supposed to be a safety thing. They were supposed to be easier to see, and people would notice them quicker and get out of the way, and it didn't happen. We got the big lights and siren and the big horns, and if they got their radio on riding down the road, they're not going to hear the horn, they're not going to see the light, they're not going to pay you any attention. But see the light, pull to the right was one of the best things that ever happened, because once that became public knowledge, everybody started doing it, and it really helped the situation. Because if you've got a fire truck or EMS or police coming to your rescue, or a loved one, you want them there. You don't want them stuck in traffic. So the yellow fire truck, that was something else. They eventually changed them and painted them back, but it was almost embarrassing.
Oh, yeah.
It was almost embarrassing. Plus the trucks were so slow back then. We got outrun by a 10-speed bicycle on Isaac's place. That was kind of neat. My first captain on the ladder truck was Junior Allen, and he was a workhorse. That guy wanted to work all day, and he wanted to do projects, which was really fun. And as a rookie, that really made the day go by when we would do or help each other with projects. The captain on the engine company was Roger Collis, and I built a rapport with both of those gentlemen. They were mentors, both on and off the job. They were both Christians, and that makes a huge difference in a person's life. And they always tried to instill positivity in everything we did at Station 12, even though back then we were a slow station. But it was a good time. Well, they started me out. Roger Collis and Junior Allen. They started me and Bobby Mitchell. We were there together. It was a great place to start because we had a squad there. We had a ladder truck. We had a pumper. We had a lot of versatility right there at that one station. My nicknames that were given to me through the years, I always laughed them off. It's kind of funny because I'm Robert. When you see me, you know that's Robert. I'm going to be the same today, tomorrow, the next day. It's just who I am. And Gary Church, love him to death. Great guy. wonderful Christian man, one of the best examples anybody could ever know. He called me strange bird. And it's one of those things where that was a compliment to me. Yeah, I'm a little different from the average bear. There's no doubt about it. I try to enjoy life. I would come into work whistling. I couldn't wait to get to work every day. And I'd come into work singing, and they'd go, man, you know, can you hold it down a little bit in there? I said I would if I could, but I can't, so I ain't. You know, so I just kept on getting it, and like I said, I want to make somebody smile. Well, I was sitting in the kitchen. Some of the pranks that happened in the Greensboro Fire Department were antics at best. But one of the funniest ones that I remember, and I don't know how they came up with it, but a fire extinguisher was involved. Not a fire extinguisher, it was an air tank. And somehow or another they rigged it to where they had this batch of flour. And on the Rookie, they released this air from the air tank, from our SCBA tank, and it blew flour everywhere. Well, that just was, everybody cracked up because the Rookie was just covered. I'm not going to call any names, but the Rookie was just covered in flour. And it was just a funny situation. But the best part was we all got together as a crew and we cleaned it up. And the cleaning up process was probably better than the antic itself because we just had a blast. And before you know it, when you get 4, 5, 6 people together to do one thing and, to accomplish one objective, which was cleaning up all that flour out of every nook and cranny in the station, it really brought us all together and closer. I'm still a member. Through my career, the union was definitely a part of it. The IAFF was kind of a dark side to some. And Bob Oakley was continually trying to build members. I remember that. Him and O'Brien and Joey McIntyre. And one day they finally just said, hey, we just need the numbers. We need to build the numbers because the more people you have, the better off you are. And well, I'm kind of easygoing. I said, well, yeah, sure, I'll try it. So I think it was in '90 I joined, and I've been a member ever since. Some of their political views I don't agree with, but the IAFF has done a lot for the fire service, and they've done a lot for Greensboro Fire Department, and now it's growing like leaps and bounds.
99% of the fire department's union.
Yeah, it's just incredible because we were fighting to get 25 people, I think, or 30 people back then. Firehouse living is something that the average person can't really imagine because it's a family away from your family. When you come in the morning, you do your routine. You have certain jobs that you have to do, and you get those jobs done. You help each other do their jobs, regardless of what they are or how long it takes, unless you're interrupted by a fire call or a medical call. You get all that done, and then you have some downtime, and then there's usually a class that somebody has to teach. One of the firefighters has chosen, hey, you teach class today. And we all would sit in the classroom or an open area, depending on what station we were at. And we would go over certain criteria of events. If we were coming up on an EMT class, we would go over maybe what was going to be in that EMT class, or if we had a test coming up. It seemed like almost every shift we either had a test or some kind of a class or some kind of a video to watch just to keep up with our certifications. In most fire stations, cooking is prevalent, or was back then. We cooked at least 2 meals, if not 3. We had certain fellas, and I was one of them, that loved to make biscuits. And that was our breakfast a lot of times. They'd put, honey and butter together and mix it all up and pour it all over them big old cat heads. And they always wanted me to make the biscuits. But yes, everybody had a cook day, is the way we divided it. And if it was your cook day at most fire stations, I can't speak for all of them, but at most fire stations you had a cook day, and you would be in charge of going to the store, or you could go the night before, or at certain times in my career you could take the fire truck and go to the store. There were also certain times in my career that you couldn't take the fire truck and go to the store, so you had to go the night before, or have somebody come in and work for you so that you could go to the store to get groceries if you forgot them. So then we would plan the meal, and whoever's cook day it was, they would plan the meal and go ahead and fix 2 meals, lunch and supper. Lunch was always at 12, supper was always at 5. And if a lot of times we get sat down at the supper table, and the food was coming out, and we'd all have our plate ready, and somebody would mention, "Old Glory still flying out front of the station," and the rookie would jump up and run out front and put the flag down, and we'd all cover his food up so it wouldn't get anything on it, or it would try to stay warm, so he would get the flag brought down before it got dark. But 5 o'clock was also the time you brought the flag down. But yes, we all cooked and all pitched in. Some were better cooks than others.
Was you a good cook?
I consider myself a decent cook.
What was your favorite dish?
Well, my favorite was the spinach braid, probably later time. Spinach braid had chicken, spinach, cheese, onions, rice, and it was wrapped in a pizza dough. And then you would braid the pizza dough over. It looked like a loaf, and you would braid it over that loaf and glaze it with stirred up egg, and I guess, what do you call that, butter in it, and you'd put it on there, and when you put it in the oven it browned up as pretty. And that, I'd make those. I'd usually make 3 or 4 of them, and they were as long as the pan and almost as wide, and they would get gone pretty quick. A lot of times people didn't want onions in them, so I'd make one with no onions. Well, the dorms and the cubicles, the differences in the two, they speak for themselves. Cubicles, what does that tell you? You're cubed off. You're isolated. The dorm situation, we were all in there together. All the beds side by side. We could just sit on the edge of the bed and converse and enjoy each other and just have a good time. And if somebody had something they could input into a conversation, then it was open to do so. Nothing was hidden. Everybody knew pretty much everything about everybody else back in those days. And when they started putting the cubicles in, I feel like it became a division. Yes, people need their privacy. I get it. But there's places in the station you can have privacy. You can go outside. You can walk around. You can spend time alone, as long as you're not away from the radio. But the cubicles isolate each individual. And when I came on the fire department or in the fire service, it was presented to me that we were a family, and families stick together. Families are not isolated and put in cubicles and divided. There are pros and cons to these cubicles, but I personally enjoyed the open dormitory effect. When you walked in the door, you saw everybody. When you walk in the door where the cubicles are, you don't see anybody. You have to go to each cubicle and peek around the corner and say, "Hey, is anybody in here? I don't want to interrupt, but I just wanted to say, hey, good morning." that kind of thing, or it's time to eat. You know, they give a division that we didn't have coming on when we had the dormitories. When you had the dormitories, if you had anything to say to anybody, all you did was open the door and stick your head in. You could talk to everybody right then, and it was really convenient and enjoyable. Well, as far as families and gatherings and togetherness in the fire service, you've got two separate families. You've got your fire service family, and you've got your family at home. A lot of times when you mix the two, it just becomes better. If you have the ability to share with your family what you do for a living, that you're actually helping people, and that you have a purpose, and that when you come home, you have your family life at home. At the fire station, you have your family life at the fire station. When you bring the two together, it's a special time, because you're sharing intimate details sometimes about the people you care about. And all that's doing is building relationships. If I ask my wife, hey, did I tell you about such and such and so? No? Well, let's sit down and we'll talk about it. Because I want you to know what's going on. We didn't share, calls and things like that, because I left that at work. When we had bad calls, they stayed at work. It wasn't something that I wanted to take home and share it with my family. What they needed to know was I came home safe and everything was okay. And that was the most important part of that fire department and family togetherness. Some of the calls that are clearest in my memory are the ones that made a difference. The ones where you go on CPRs and it's a success. Those medical calls made a difference. There were those medical calls that you got where some little old lady in the middle of the night was lonely, and you as the fire department would show up, and there's really nothing wrong with them, so you'd have to cancel EMS. But because firefighters care, and they have a heart like none other, a lot of times we would just sit and just talk to the little old lady that called and was lonely because she might have lost her husband, or something terrible was happening in her life and she had nobody to turn to. And we were there, and we stayed long enough to where we found out that she was okay and that she could make it through the night. And then we would go back. We made a difference. There are fire calls that come to mind that I never took home. Ones where we had loss of life. Children. That have lost everything. Homes just burned to the ground. One in particular that happened 10 years apart. The same apartment, or the same apartment building. This was when I was at 43. Lawndale, or Cottage Place. The Cottage Place fire was back in the back, and we laid everything off the truck that day. Every piece of hose that would come off that truck. And it was freezing cold, and you had icicles on your helmet, trying to do your job and slipping and sliding and falling. But we got the job done just the same. Well, then 10 years after that occurred in that winter, the same building caught on fire. And both, I think, had fatalities. The Guilford Avenue fire back when I was at 5, that was a life save. I remember that one. That was one of those big 2-story split up, cut up houses that they make apartments into, off on Guilford Avenue, Middle Greensboro area. And that was something where we had to do work that, as a firefighter, we're trained to always have a hose line in place. But we laddered that building and went up the ladder, and we could see the victim. And we didn't have a hose line in place, but we could see the victim. So we made the decision to go in and retrieve that victim, and she lived to tell about it. And I go back to what I said before. As a firefighter, you have the opportunity to make a difference. You have the opportunity to make a difference in somebody's life, somebody's livelihood, maybe your own. You have an opportunity to be something bigger than you ever thought you could be.
When a retired firefighter visits the fire station, why is it important to take a little time with them?
When a firefighter that is retired visits fire stations here in Greensboro or anywhere, if they make mention that they're a retired firefighter, immediately they should be welcomed in with open arms, in my opinion, because once a firefighter, always a firefighter. Now, when you retire and you leave the service, it's always in you. I mean, to this day, I miss work. I miss the people. I miss my big red truck. And I wish I could go back sometimes, because those were good times.
What value do you see in these retiree interviews?
Well, the value in these interviews is tenfold, in my opinion. It gives the opportunity for us as retirees to express some of the heartfelt feelings that we've had through our career that, as being rough and tough firefighters, we weren't supposed to talk about, or we just didn't talk about, because you were supposed to be able to handle stuff and be that tough firefighter. And these interviews are opening doors. They're good questions. They're opening doors where we can discuss feelings, emotions, activities, and accomplishments throughout a fire career. And a fire career is unlike any other career in the world today, as far as I'm concerned.
You remember your first fire call or emergency call, whatever, and where was that?
My first fire call was on Parkmont Court at Station 12, or from Station 12. Tom Sladke was the driver. I was on the back of the truck. And let's see, I was riding the engine that day, as a matter of fact. And that's why I was on the back of the engine, because we had somebody out. So I filled in and rode the engine that day. And we went to Parkmont Court, and it was a house fire. And we pulled up. Nobody else had gotten there yet. The ladder was on its way. And Tom said, "Grab that booster hose." And so I did. I did as I was told. And we went in and we put the fire out with the booster hose. Then we came back out and we said, well, you know, we might ought to put air pack on before the chief gets here, so we won't get in trouble. But we just did our job. You know, we went in. It was a pretty, you know, put the wet stuff on the hot stuff, and the hot stuff goes away. And it was pretty simple, but to me it was exciting. My first medical call that I can remember, also at 12, was a drowning. And it was basically right across the street at one of the apartment complexes. And that was not a good outcome. And some bad publicity came out of it, not for very long, but the mother was mad because we didn't bring her son back, you know, with CPR. He was long gone when we got there. Wasn't nothing we could do. We tried. But it was just nothing we could do. So that was my first experience of losing somebody, or not being able to help, or make that positive difference.
Can't save them all.
Can't save them all.
You're making me emotional. You're doing good, Robert. What about, I think you mentioned some of your bigger calls. Any other that you want to talk about, like multi-alarm calls that you had? I know you mentioned some earlier. Is any more around, or if not, that's fine.
Well, the Gurcade fire. It was a big warehouse. It was a memorable event. We were on mop-up. We weren't actually on the fire, but we were on mop-up, and we had to basically take the aerial fire stream and peel the roof back, because there was hidden fires up underneath a multi-layer roof. And I think the most memorable thing about that whole fire was that we found the victim, and had to bring him out and bag up the body. And I'd never done that before, never seen it done before, and it made an impact on my life. And to this day, I remember what the guy looked like. I remember the smell. I remember zipping the bag. And, one side of the victim was burnt crisp. The other side of the victim was flawless. And it was a homeless man. And they think that he caused the fire. But, your big fires, they always stay in your mind, but when there's loss of life, that's when they make an impact. You can rebuild stuff. You can rebuild buildings. You can make it all brand new again, but you cannot replace a life. 9/11, when 9/11 occurred, it's an understatement to say it was a shock. I was on light duty. It was right after my injury when I fell and hurt myself, and I was on light duty so that I wouldn't have to burn up my sick leave. And we were all upstairs in Station 1, where admin was at that time, and everybody's eyes were glued to the television. The first plane hit. They talked about it. What could it be? Did the pilot make a mistake? Was it terrorism? Then the second plane hit, and it went from bad to worse. And the loss of lives that day were unbelievable. And then you would see the victims jumping trying to just get out of the building. They were just jumping. They had nowhere else to go. And it affected me to the point of there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way to live than hate. It's a lot easier to love than it is to hate. And 9/11 was all about hate. And that's what I got out of that. Firefighters, EMS, police, they all gave all they had that day. And then some. And then that night. And then the mop up and the mop up. Day in, day out. It's an impact that our nation, we've adapted, we've overcome, but it'll never be forgotten. Would I do it all over again, or would I do anything different? Wow, what a question. In a minute, if I had the opportunity and the physical ability, I would most definitely do that job again. And I don't think I'd do anything different. I have absolutely no regrets in my career. I made it a point to try to treat everybody the same, even if they weren't very kind to me. And I had some of that. Everybody has. When you got people that are just bullies. And it happens in every job situation. But I wouldn't make any changes, because there's certain people you can't change. You just have to adapt and overcome. And that's our motto. My proudest moment. You mean on the fire department? Or just in general?
In general.
My proudest moment was when I decided to ask my wife to marry me. And after the third try, she said yes. You know, if you know me, it's sometimes hard to take me serious. But deep down, I'm always serious. The next one was when I got hired on the fire department. I had my family, my wife, my mom's support, my brothers, my sister. Everybody was rooting for me. I just felt like it was something I needed to do. I left a job I loved. I enjoyed doing, working with Patsy and Donald Pumphrey with a breath of spring. But I just felt like it was the right way to go. And it, like I said, it felt like a calling. And for whatever reason, God puts us in a place that He can make a difference. We don't always know the reason why things happen, but God knows why. God knows when, and God knows how things are going to happen. Well, coping mechanisms in the loss of victims, family members, fellow firefighters, you have to dig deep. Coping with the death of someone you know, especially if it's a shock, you have to seek a higher power. You have to share what you know. You have to share what you feel with others. Because that person that you've lost lives within you somewhere. There's a part of that person in you, and you have to carry that forward. And we lost some good ones in the fire service. When I lost my family members, you know, if I hadn't had the fire service, that we confided in each other, and it really helped when I finally had to go back to work after those deaths. When when Jackie Beard died there on a training evolution, I was dumbfounded. Had to play at his funeral. Jackie Spoon, again, that was something that was just an accident, but it happened. And you just have to wrap your arms around it and talk to each other about it and see if we can maybe prevent that from happening again. Again, I played at his funeral. Rick Merle. An accident. Those sudden ones are just hard to swallow. You wonder, why them? Why did that happen? But it's not our place to figure out why. It's what good can come out of it. That's what we have to concentrate on. And that's what we have to share with each other to build each other up. Because we're here to encourage, not to discourage. Most significant change in the fire service, in my opinion, is equipment and technology. Like I said from the beginning, I was putting the outriggers down by hand. It was my job. I had to take the hose up by hand. I had to drop the rope by hand. The technology, as far as the equipment, the trucks, your rescue equipment, it's all gotten better through the years. And finally, the computer systems that have come about, they were hard to accept. But once you get to where you can actually use what has been presented to you to help you get your job done, eventually it ended up pretty good. And that end of it is just constantly getting better. Their fire calls that come through the radios are so much clearer now. When I go to the station, it presents the address on a screen. Back in the day when I started, we had to look it up on a map and sometimes carry the map with us in our pocket and bring it out and look at it as we're going down the road. If it was an area that we were unfamiliar with, we were filling in with another station. But now it comes up, tells you where to go. I don't know if it tells you how to get there, but I think it does. And it's the clarity of the dispatch is so much better than it used to be. We used to all ask each other, what did that dispatcher say? What was the name of the street? Where are we going? And so it became something we all worked together to try to get to the dispatch location. The advice I would give upcoming firefighters is to learn to listen. God gave us one mouth. God gave us 2 ears. We're supposed to listen twice as good as we talk. So if you listen, especially to some of the guys and gals that are ahead of you or have been there, done that, take heed. Learn from the ones that have come before you and try to help everybody you can in things that you know and want to achieve. And if you help each other, you're going to be successful in your career from start to finish. What I would like for the Greensboro Fire Department to remember about Robert Johnson is that I was available. I was willing. That I was the same whenever you saw me. And that Robert Johnson treated everybody the same, regardless of where they were from, who they knew, who they were kin to, what station they worked at, that they would always see Christ in me. That when they saw Robert Johnson, it went, oh God, here he comes. I wouldn't want that. I would want them to know that I'm there to be a part of whatever's happening and just enjoy our time together. I'd like for my family to remember that I care. That I love each and every one of you. That everything I do to the utmost of my ability in hopes that it'll be remembered in days gone by that Robert made an impact, and that I will always love you. And my reason for being here on this planet is to love my family. Love God, love my family, and love my church.
Anything you want to say? It's your chance.
Now, I think it's been a great question and answer session, and I hope I've given you everything that you want.
Hello, I'm retired Battalion Chief Larry Cockman, Chairman of the Greensboro Fire Department History Book Committee. The American Fire Service is rich in tradition and culture. A firefighter's life is filled with many emotional highs and lows. Stories of major fires, national disasters, medical calls, firehouse living, and family life are often verbally shared from one generation to another. Many times, these stories are lost forever when a firefighter passes away. In an effort to preserve these stories, in 2019, the Greensboro Fire Department History Book Committee launched a new program of recording audio-video of our retirees' lives. These stories will be shared on our website, gfhbc.org. In 2020, we did not record because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Please listen as these firefighters share their life experiences with all of us.